Welcome back to Meaty Magic. My name is Harry, and today we're going to talk about Tarkir Dragonstorm Draft. This is my draft guide deep dive. So Hunter and I are very excited to draft this set. Actually, he was just sitting with me, and we already opened a box, and we're kind of building decks together before we turn the cameras on. So I wanted to help you all get some thoughts together as I was getting thoughts together so we can think about how to navigate this draft. I'll probably revisit this once I have a couple drafts under my belt, but as I'm recording, we're about to go to pre-release, but I haven't seen any of the cards actually in action. It's all just thinking right now. So I'm thinking, though, it's going to, I feel like I can confidently say this is going to be a very, very fun draft set. I grinded the hell out of Aether Drift Draft, but it wasn't that fun for me. So I'm really excited to play a ton of this on Arena. And I have a personal goal of hitting Mythic this season, and so it's a lot nicer that the games are going to be fun, knowing that I have to play a ton of them if I want to get to that ranking. So I'm going to help you wherever you're at, try to do better at your drafts, whether that's in person or on Arena, and we're going to just talk about some things. So I'm just going to jump right in because I don't want to waste any of our time. I wanted to start talking about this set. So we're going to put stuff up on the screen as I'm talking about it, but I'm just going to kind of go through what I'm seeing and how I'm evaluating it. And then at the very end of this video, I'm going to do a pack 1, pick 3, just to kind of further talk you through what I'm thinking as I'm looking at a pack, because there's a lot of shiny things to look at, because there's a lot of gold cards, but also just a lot of fun things. Just right before we jump in, though, I want to say Magic, Wizards, you did it right. Magic is back. This is what got me and Nick and Hunter into the game of like this great concept. Again, Tarkir is a revisit from the old Khans block, which you saw us play some of those cards in the old Khans Commander deck on this channel. But just so good art. The names of the cards are great. The interactions and of the cards are really fun. And I think a lot of the playstyles are going to also just be awesome. So I'm really happy that they just nailed all of this. So yeah, let's talk about it. First off, this is going to be a little different. Whether this is your very first draft, hi, welcome, hope you have fun, or if you're kind of even a veteran player that have been grinding drafts for the last like 5 sets. This is different in the sense that it's going to be a baseline 3-color set. Why? Because each clan is 3 colors, right? There's Mardu, Abzan, Jeskai, Sultai, and Temur, which we'll talk about a little bit later, don't worry. But you're going to be playing 3 colors. One, because there's a lot of cards in the set that have the 3 mana symbols printed on them, but also those are the best cards. So, and then also there are a lot of cards that enable you to do so. And that can lead me to talking about our first point, which is fixing. So whenever you hear someone talk about fixing, it's just meaning to fix your mana base to make sure you hit the right colors at the right amount of time so that you can actually cast your card, right? A lot of times in a draft format, it's a 2-color set. That's perfectly fine. You start get the archetypes. You know, a really good example of this, a hardcore example of this is Bloomburrow, where are you the red-white mice, or are you the blue-green frogs, or the blue-red otters, right? And there wasn't a lot of wiggle room. I know Hunter loved that set. I personally had a little frustration with it because, you know, as I've said on record multiple times, I like to get a little bit weird with it and splash and splash. And in that format, it really wasn't enabled. One, because of the lands. There weren't a lot of lands that tap for multiple colors, and there weren't a lot of artifacts that helped you tap for colors. And that's where all the fixing comes from. But in this set, we have a tri-land for each clan. So now I'm going to talk about the colors. So Frontier Bivouac is the Temur land. So it comes about, all these come in a battlefield tap, but that one taps for red, green, and blue. That's Temur colors. Then we have Mystic Monastery, which taps for red, white, and blue. That's Jeskai. And then we have Nomad Outpost that taps for red, white, and black. That's Mardu. And then we have Opulent Palace that taps for black, green, blue. The place I'm going to be residing the most, that's Sultai. And then we have Sandstep Citadel, which is taps for white, black, or green. And that's where Hunter's going to be hanging out with Abzan colors. And then we have 10 dual lands that enter the battlefield tap and give you a pip of life, which that's going to matter, trust me, that tap for a mixture of 2 different colors. So the fixing is incredible in this set, which is why you're going to play 3 colors. And I know that's going to feel weird, but you're going to do it. But hang on, for me, my hairy tip is the best decks are going to be playing 3 colors and a splash of a 4th. And we'll talk about that more probably in another video, but I just want to put that out there. Like, you got to watch your mana base, but you're probably doing it right if you are home based in a clan and then splashing a fourth color for like 2 or 3 really powerful cards. I'll give an example of that as we get a little bit further down, but you need to be looking out for these cards. You need to be taking them highly, especially if you're in a lower rank right now. When you fire up Arena, you're going to see a lot of these cards going around the table. One, because they're commons, so there might be 2 to 3 of these lands in the pack, but I think people are going to undervalue them. But within even 3 days of the set coming out, I think you're going to see it's a lot harder to reliably get those cards. So just do the work now, grab those cards, because they're going to pay huge dividends, especially when you know you want to hit 3 colors, and then like I'm saying, you want to splashy splash on a 4th, maybe 5th color. That is going to be huge. I'm going to say you're going to want 3 to 4 of those dual lands. If you have 1 tri-land, you could probably get away with 2 dual lands, so 3 total, but I wouldn't want any less than 3. Within that, you probably want a home base, and I'm going to talk about that when we get to the clans of like, you want to be firmly in these 2 colors, and then have some cards in that 3rd clan color, and then maybe have 2 to 3 cards in that 4th splash color. Okay, but now even going a little bit further in the fixing, so you want to get the lands. Do not pull up to a Tarkir Dragonstorm draft with 0 to 1 fixing lands, okay? Just don't talk to me. But there are also monuments. This is a reference to old Khans block. There was a cycle of monuments from the 2-color dragons, and they tap for the 2 colors, right? So Kalagon's monument tap for black and a red, but it also, you could activate it and turn the artifact into a 4/4 dragon until end of turn. These ones do similar, but instead of tapping, they actually just find you the land. So all the monuments find their colors. So Abzan monument enters the battlefield, and it finds you your choice of a swamp, a forest, or a plains. And then they all have abilities. I'm not going to go into the abilities. I just wanted to call these out and remind you that these are also good. And not only that, if the monument finds 2 of the 3 colors that you are trying to play, you just play it, right? So don't be so tunneled on clan mindset that if you're playing Sultai, you're like, oh, I can't take a Temur monument. Yes, you can, because Temur monument helps you find a green and a blue, which you're playing green and blue. Now we split hairs on the red versus black element, but if you're playing red, also finds you there. Also, it might be a little bit savvy if you're playing the monument specifically to help you hit the 1 fixing color, or splash color, sorry, and also at least home bases in 1 color. So like in that same example, if I'm playing Sultai, but I'm splashing a white card, spoiler, which I think I'm going to do a lot in this format, I will grab the Abzan monument because it's going to find me the white card, or the plains. It also can find me a swamp. So this is actually a great example. I didn't think about that, but that is super nice, because knowing if you ever play this monument, you can always find that plains, assuming you don't draw it, that lets you play like 1 to 2 plains in your deck, which is also really important. You do need to have some ways to cast this card if you ever have it. Again, granted, the card is worth casting, but now it's nice to just be like, oh, this is kind of doubling as Evolving Wilds for me for my 1 of splash color land that also has an ability for later if I want to use it. So don't overlook the monuments. I think ideally, maybe if you're playing Mardu, you don't need this, but ideally you're playing 1 of these 2 if you see them in your colors, especially if you're trying to get splashy like I am. One more thing I want to talk about before we get fully into the clans themselves is these devotees. Each clan has a devotee, and they all are 2 drops, except Mardu is a 1-drop, which makes sense because Mardu is the more aggressive of the 5 clans. But all of these are worth a look just because they help filter colors. Again, this is still under the umbrella we're talking about fixing, right? So they all say pay 1 of any mana, and then you could turn it into 1 of the 3 colors of the clan. So obviously Temur Devotee, for example, is a 3/3 defender for 2, which on that face is really good starting out. And then you could pay 1 mana of any color and then add a forest, an island, or a mountain, your choice, 1 only. And then you can only activate this once each turn. So you can't over abuse it, but it is going to be really nice to just transform 1 of your colors into the other color that you need that turn. I think people are going to overlook this and then their mind not see like the power of the flexibility of it and just think like, well, why am I paying 1 mana to just get another mana? That doesn't make sense. But remember, colors are king here. And sometimes in your Abzan deck, you just draw 2 planes, and then you have a forest, but you don't have that black mana, but you have a black 3-drop. So tap one of those planes, turn it into a swamp thanks to the Abzan devotee, or maybe even the Sultai devotee, and then cast your Abzan 3-drop that needs the swamp, okay? So keep all these cards on your radar. All of these cards so far that I've mentioned, though, are commons or uncommons, so they will be around. I'm not saying you have to first pick these, although I think a lot of times you are going to pick the Tri-lands like second pick if you see them, just because they're that flexible and they're that useful. But I just want to keep this stuff in your mind. This also leads to a good natural point to talk about. Most of the stuff I'm going to cover today is commons and uncommons, all right? Because I love the working class here, and when you draft, which is also why I love drafts so much and why I've built a commons and uncommons only cube, is that you have to get to know the cards that you're going to see a lot. Yes, there are these crazy, splashy, mythic 3-color dragons that probably can just win the game that people will definitely define as a bomb. Are you going to see that every time you rip a pack in Arena? No. Could you go 5 to 10 drafts before you see this card in a pack in Arena? Yes. And, you know, knowing our luck, we're probably going to sit down and our opponent will have it, but that's just how packs break, baby. And the things that you are going to see are some of these tap lands, some of these devotees, and some of these other cards I'm going to talk about in a second. So that was another thing I wanted to bring up, is that I am going to let you, because that's part of the fun, experience the rares on your own. I am not going to give you this exhaustive list of like, oh, take this card over this card. If you're in Mardu, you have to have this card. That's just not how draft works. That's not realistic. But also, like, I'm going to work backwards. Like, I'm going to say, if you took a crazy cool Mardu card from your first pack or your second, within your first like 2-3 picks, here's how I think you should build around that to support it, to have the most fun, to have success. And I think that's just the better way to go about it personally, because I still want you to have some of this magic. And I think there's a lot of it to go around in this set of just grabbing, like, I want to just play this, putting the blinders on, pack 1, like, this card seems sick, I'm taking it, I'm Sultai now. Cool. I'm going to show you what some of the roadmap I think you should build your deck now because you've taken that. Just wanted to call that out. There is one more thing I want to talk about before we officially get into the clans, and I just want to talk about it briefly, but I think it's important. And this is this extra sauce that hopefully you're getting from watching our video as opposed to maybe somebody else's video on the matter, is that there are these hybrid mana cost cards, okay? They're mostly all uncommon. No, there are a suite of uncommons and some commons, and they're confusing to look at. I understand. We'll put them up on the screen here. An example of this is Temur back, okay? So it's telling you it's a Temur card, so you can expect to see blue, red, and green in the mana symbols. You do, but each card is also interspliced between the number 2 and kind of like a line between it. So that's telling you you can cast this card for blue, red, and green, okay? So 3 mana total, which is pretty nice because the card is a 4/3 beast that when it enters, you draw a card and discard a card. But that's the cheapest it can be, but it's a variable cost. So if you don't have the mountain, let's say, but you go green, blue, no mountain, then you can pay 2 mana of any color. So that's only 4 mana total. That's still not bad for a 4/3 draw a card, discard a card. Actually, that was like a pretty powerful, well-worn card in Dominaria draft for 2 red. So I want people, just like the monument thing, to open their mind a little bit and think of like, what is this actually telling me? Because all of these cards, I could cast this card if I wanted to in a deck that has no mountains, forests, or islands, and pay just 6 straight up colorless mana. Still, in draft, don't hate it. Would love it to not be 6 mana, but it's possible. So I want you to keep in mind, because some of these cards, especially if they have a good effect, like the Tawny back, or if it's just a straight up removal spell, like Kin Tree Severance, where it just says exile this if it costs 3 or greater. That's a really good effect, and you might not have enough removal, and you might want to think about taking these cards. Not highly necessarily, but I expect them to make the rounds in the draft pods, because again, everyone's doing the same thing. Well, like, I can't cast this card because I'm not playing these colors. Well, you can, right? And again, a lot of the times I'm expecting you're going to be playing one of these colors. So in the Tawny back example, let's say you're playing a mountain in your deck, it's going to cost you 5, right? So the cheapest it can cost you is 3. More than likely, these cards are going to cost you 5, and then in complete utter despair, sometimes it could cost you 6. But that's how I would view these cards. It's like, if these just cost 5 mana, is this effect still good? That's a question for you to ask yourself as you're going through and what you might need. But definitely in a like Sultai deck, I'm going to be playing this Tawny back because I want to discard cards, both to just draw cards, but then I specifically, there are cards I want to put in my graveyard, etc., etc. But same thing in the Sultai example, I would want this Kin Tree Severance. It's a great removal spell. There are a lot of dragons flying around at the table that are going to cost 3 or more that I want to deal with and get off the board. And yeah, so if that means I cast this for 5 at instant speed to just straight exile, which is in this format better than going in the graveyard, I'm going to do it every day of the week. I'm going to sign up for that. So just want to keep those in your mind, because I think once you get the mana and start getting these late round cards that actually could go in your deck, could be cast in your deck and have value, I think you're going to start seeing yourself outpace some of your opponents that aren't grabbing these cards. All right, so now we are going to talk about the clans. I better put my hands down as I say that. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've ranked all 5 clans in the manner that I think both for power and what I recommend you to play. And this is kind of just straight down the barrel, because I know that there are beginners and some people that still don't even fully understand the game watching this channel. So I want to still like cater to them in a way I think that they can have success and still like have fun. But even for the people that are pretty well established in the game, I think this still also applies to you. And then you can just take your flavoring or play style how you want. This isn't a hard and fast ranking, but I just thought it'd be a good way to talk about them. So number 5, the one, again, all of them are going to be good. All of them are going to be fun, but the one that I think is going to have the most trouble is Jeskai. So Jeskai, again, America colors, blue, white, and red. Oh, well, hold on. First, sorry, for fun, for all the clans, I wrote 3-word synopses of them. So for Jeskai, this 3-word synopsis is Flying Prowess Monks. And I think that's pretty well done, and it's very understandable of what's actually going on in Jeskai. This is a faction of monks that when we last saw them in cons, they did have a lot of prowess triggers. You know, you think of Monastery Mentor or Monastery Swiftspear, cards that had prowess that cared about when you cast non-creature spells. And that's what prowess means, by the way. For me, I think the reason that Jeskai is last on the list is because you're presented with this problem. As we talk about each clan, I'm going to tell you how I think you should lean on the colors. Because again, like I'm saying, it's a 3-color pairing, so you have to play all 3 colors, but you want to be a little bit more home-based in 2 of the 3 colors so that your mana base is better and you just kind of know what you're about as you're evaluating cards in the draft pool. And I think Jeskai is the only one where you could really go either way, and it plays 2 separate ways, which is why it's hard. You either want to be this kind of blue-red lean where you're being more aggro, you got quicker boots on the ground, you have haste, you're kind of just spelling off and triggering prowess, but also like using burn and tricks to kind of get in. Or you want to play, which I think is going to be the more effective version of Jeskai, is you're going to be playing this blue-white lean and you're going to be playing this control deck. It's hard to always be the control deck in draft. Sometimes your opponent just comes out way faster than you, or you could have the removal, but you just didn't draw it in the right time. You're taking too much damage before you get set up. And control is pretty hard to play for newer players, which is why it lands in the 5th spot. Jeskai's new keyword. So there are a bunch of keywords, but they're not crazy, and they're all pretty intuitive, and they're all kind of riffs on previous mechanics. So Flurry is the Jeskai keyword, and it basically is just saying, it's just a check. If you cast 2 spells this turn and you have a creature that cares about you casting 2 spells this turn, you get a little bonus, right? And notably, cards that have Flurry themselves, if you cast them first, so if you cast Devoted Duelist, for instance, and then cast another 2-drop right after it, that card will see that this is the 2nd spell, Flurry will trigger, and it'll do 1 damage to your opponent. So I have these 4 cards here. Again, I'm not going to talk about them, but they're all reasons that you may want to see in a pack and jump to Jeskai, right? So you have Jeskai Brushmaster, Double Strike Prowess, 2/4 butt, pretty strong. This Jeskai Shrine Keeper. I think all the uncommon clan dragons are very good and very like old school, make you see it in a pack. You're like, holy crap, I want to play this. This is awesome. This looks awesome. And then this Flamehold Grappler, and then the Narset. So yeah, let's just say you see one of those and you're like, all right, give me that. I want to play this. This looks cool. Now let's talk about how to break this down. So in this little pocket here, I have on my dock titled Emblematic Cards. So I have Devoted Duelist here listed, Snowmelt Stag, Dagur Island Dragon, and Rally the Monastery. And I'm not saying these are the best cards for the archetype. I'm just saying this is kind of telling you in a neat little box what this archetype, this color pairing is trying to do. So we talked about Devoted Duelist. He's a 2-drop haste, which I said, on the blue-red lean side, that's kind of what you're trying to do. Plus, you're trying to flurry, and notably, his flurry trigger is to just do 1 direct damage to the opponent. So again, burn them out, get them down quick, cast spells, and just try to close the book early. Snowbelt Stag is on the total opposite end of this spectrum, where it's a 2/5 for 4, which huge blocker. It's going to hold back so much stuff. It has vigilance too, which is really funny. So there are going to be some board states where you can like peck in for 2 and then still hold back the rest of their team. Or sorry, during its turn, it becomes a 5/2. So this is funny. Once the dust is settled, once you've controlled enough stuff, then you can just start turning it into a battering ram to take your opponent down. And then it has this pretty well-worn ability that you pay 5 blue, it becomes unblockable. And again, on your turn, it's be hitting for 5, kind of like reminiscent of what we just saw with Gear Seeker Serpent in Aether Drift, although that card didn't perform as well as it did in Kaladesh. But yeah, great closer card. And then the Dagur Island Dragon aren't really focused on the dragon side, although that's good. We also have this new kind of keyword called Omen, which if you play during either of the Eldraine sets, it's basically adventure, except you shuffle the card back in. And so that's going to be interesting as you go forward to evaluate some of these cards, because if you assume it's adventure, then it's awesome. Like, oh, I get this 1 spell, then later I cast a big dragon. When you cast the Omen side, you have to shuffle it back in. So for certain spells that you want to potentially redraw and cast multiple times, it's awesome. So like for this one, 1 in a blue, tap a creature down, draw a card. A lot of times you're going to be using that defensively. So when they say go to attack, say tap your creature down, that can't attack this turn, I draw a card, right? So getting some tempo, getting some card draw. And then you shuffle it back, maybe draw it again later. That's nice. Or maybe you draw it really late in the game after you've suppressed their advance. Then you cast it a 4/4 dragon flyer with Ward 2 and hopefully close the game that way. And then Rally of the Monastery really sums this up because 1, it costs less if you're flurrying it, and then it either gives you 2 1/1 white monk creature tokens with prowess, which is a reference to Monastery Mentor, or you can give 2 creatures +2/+2 until end of turn. So that's a big bump, but also again assuming they have prowess. Casting this will trigger prowess, so even if they're 2 1/1s with prowess, like let's say we had the 2 monks and you target both of them, they become 3/3s, but then on cast trigger they get +1/+1 again, so they're 2 4/4s. It's a lot of damage if you're jamming. I said jammage. That's a lot of jammage. Or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So again, this control element. Great card. Definitely want one of those in your Jeskai deck, but this is kind of summing up like what you're trying to do in Jeskai. So now let's take a quick look at enablers. Again, it's going to look a little weird. These aren't the best cards, but you want cheap spells if you're going to try to flurry, which is why Unending Whisper is here. This card doesn't look that great. Pay 1 at sorcery speed to draw a card, that's fine, and then you can harmonize later, which we'll talk in a second what harmonize does. But again, you just want to cast cheap spells, 1 to flurry, but also to trigger prowess, and this card at least lets itself be able to be cast twice. Same thing with Wingspan Stride. You can pay 1, this would be kind of goofy, but if you really need it, if it really means like, if I do 1 damage to my opponent, I will win, and I have the Duelist out, I will pay 1 mana to put this enchantment on a creature, pay 3 mana to bop it back to my hand, pay another blue mana to put on my creature, trigger flurry, win the game, right? This card is going to be useful in a lot of cases, but it's notable that it can trigger flurry by itself. High Spire Bellringer is a 1/4 flyer for 3 that lets your second spell cast 1 less. This is going to be kind of a headache to track in paper, but on Arena, you'll be fine. You cast a spell, it'll notice that, and then it's like, ooh, if you want to cast something else, it'll cheapen all of the cards in your hand, which will be nice. And then Rebellious Strike, which is a reference to Defiant Strike, but it costs 1 more this turn, and instead of buffing +1/+0, it gives +3/+0, and you still draw the card. Cards like this are going to be nice little tricks on either side of the aggro lean or the control lean to trigger flurry, but then also, again, any card that says draw a card, you could be considering it for Jeskai. And then we have 2 other removal spells that I think are going to be important. This 5-drop Narset's Rebuke, deal 5 damage to a thing. If it dies, exile it. That's really relevant, which we'll talk about later. And then you get to float Jeskai back, so maybe you could flurry on their turn or even on your turn, since it refunds some of the mana costs back. And then this Osseous Exhale, classic white control card that we see it come a lot. For 2 mana, you can deal 5 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. And then there's this little sub keyword called Behold that if you can point to a dragon on your board, or if you can show a dragon in your hand, you'll get a little bonus. So in this case, you're going to gain 2 life, which again, if you're playing control and you've taken on some early water from aggressive red deck, gaining that 2 life is actually pretty meaningful. So who are we trying to like dance with in this Jeskai deck? If I see one of these cards early or get them early, then I can consider really leaning into Jeskai. Again, let's assume we took like the Jeskai Dragon. Now it's like, okay, am I still really doing this? Well, Poise Practitioner is a 2/3/4/3 that has Flurry, and you get to put a counter on it whenever you Flurry, and you get the Scry 1. This is the kind of card that I love. It's waving this flag at you saying like, hey, if you want to get into doing this keyword and trying to build around it, we could have fun together, right? We can make some memories. So I love these build around cards. I love that it's a common. I love that she starts out as a 2/3. So you trigger this once as a 3/4. It's a pretty meaningful creature. It blocks a lot, but then it's a 4/5. Also, you're scrying, which is really going to help like your card manipulation at the top of your deck. And then another card, Wingblade Disciple, is a 2/2 flyer for 3 that whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you create a 1/1 white bird token, which again, I guess I should have mentioned this, but it does say each turn, so you could Flurry on your turn. You get enough mana to cast 2 spells on your opponent's turn, Flurry will trigger again, so that Practitioner could go from a 2/3 to a 3/4 to a 4/5 on their turn. Again, you have to have that dearth of spells and also the mana to do so, but that's interesting. And also the Wingblade Disciple could all of a sudden be like, I'm just sitting here by myself, make 2 birds that end up ambushing, blocking something that your opponent's attacking with, either to chump or to trade. It's noteworthy. But these are the 2 cards that I really get excited about. One's a common, one's an uncommon, that I'm like, okay, this is what we're trying to do. And then we start grabbing, you know, the Unending Whispers, the Exhales, the strikes of it all to really make this happen. Bodyguard, Waste Speaker Bodyguard is also really good. It buys you a permanent back to your hand, and then as you're flurrying, it taps stuff down, because another sub-theme of this deck is you can get double strike. So the Equilibrium Adept, for instance, is a 2/4 Dog Monk for 4 that has Flurry, that when you Flurry, it gets double strike. So again, if we're sitting there, you have the Bodyguard, Flurry trigger, the Adept gets double strike, you tap down their 1 blocker, Kraken for a ton of damage. You know, maybe you throw in the Rebellious Strike, that's a ton of damage, and you just close the door that way. That's kind of it. I think the Quarry Mountain Stalwart's worth noting. That's going to be a great trigger to just keep kind of soft helixing your opponent. But the real finishers are these 2 Stormbrood brothers that I think you're going to want to take highly, that are going to help you win the game a lot. In combination with the Stag. I think the Stag is actually going to do a lot of work in this Jeskai shell. Twin Moss Stormbrood, and then we'll talk about the next clan, is a reference to an old card. It has Roast on it. On the Omen side has Roast, so it's 1 and a red, deals 5 damage to target creature without flying. I get it. There's a lot of dragons flying around, so you can't target this card with a dragon, but there's a lot of cards you still want to kill, and 5 damage in limited format really kills most everything. And then later, you could play it as a 5/4 flyer for 6 mana, and when it enters battlefield, you gain 5 life. You know, Thragtusk, eat your heart out, I guess, because that is, again, we talked about 2 life being meaningful. 5 life is really could dig you out at the depths, and 5/4 flyer could be a great finisher. And then in the same way, the Room Scale Stormbrood, not really looking towards it so much on the Omen side. That's one of the ones I don't care about, and it's so cheap, the dragon side, that I don't even know if there's times that I could like counter the spell I'm going to do it, because again, that means I have to shuffle the deck. It's going to be like a moment-to-moment decision you have to make. But this card is a 2/4 base for 3 and a red flyer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell or a dragon spell, this creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So this card, in combination with the Bodyguard, let's say that you're starting at 1 flying blocker, you have them at like 8 health. You could all of a sudden just kill them, because you could go the Strike, maybe the Roast on another creature. That's going to trigger. So now it's getting +2/0, +2/0, plus the +3/0 from the Strike, and you get the Flurry. You tap down their dragon or their flying blocker, Kraken for a ton of damage. This card, if your opponent has it on the field and you have a blocker, I would keep it up, because you don't want to just die out of nowhere. Okay, so now let's talk about Temur. That was a lot for Jeskai, but I do think there's a lot to say about it, because it's not as cut as dry, which is also why I'm ranking it so lowly. The next one is going to be Temur. So Temur I have low-ish, but I kind of come up higher on it since I've been looking at the cards a little bit more. Their 3-word synopsis is big gets bigger, and we'll talk about that in a second. The lean is probably blue-green, and then you're splashing that red for maybe like that Roast card or some other burn removal. That's really what you're using the red part for. Their new keyword is Harmonize, which Harmonize is really cool. It's flashback plus a 1 creature convoke if you want. What does that mean? So flashback, as long as this card is in the graveyard, graveyard. So let's look at Ureni's rebuff here. It is a 1 and a blue. You can return target creature to its owner's hand. Okay, simple bounce spell. But if it's in the graveyard, you can harmonize it for 5 and a blue. And that basically means you can now cast it again because it's in the graveyard. And if you want, you don't have to, you could tap down one of your creatures, and that basically cheapens the cost equal to its power. So as a thought exercise, I keep thinking of like if I have a 4/4 creature, probably should think of a 3/3 creature. That make it more realistic. But let's just say I have a 4/4 creature. This harmonized for 6. If I choose to tap my 4/4 creature down, that cheapens the cost by 4. I still have to pay the blue, and then I just need to pay 1 of any other color, and I could cast that spell. And depending on what the moment is on the battlefield, that could be really useful for me. Obviously, if the creature's tapped down, it can no longer attack, it can no longer block, so you got to factor that in. But spells that let themselves be cast again is very useful, very powerful, which is why flashback cards are pretty well beloved and also sparingly printed, because you can't flood the market with too much of them, or else every deck in different formats would have a ton of flashback. Temur is a lot of fun. In the first iteration, in old cons, if you watch the cons commander deck that we put up, when someone mentioned Temur, we all laughed. Notably, Temur was absent at the table, right? Everyone was playing one of the clans. There had to be an odd man out. I already knew when I was building these decks it was going to be Temur, because Temur did nothing in standard, in that standard. It didn't really do anything in that limited either. They were just, people got really hyped on some of the cards, and then it just didn't do anything. Because their whole shtick was, we're just big. But there wasn't anything like really meaningfully going on. And again, in my assessment of them, you know, I mentioned that they get big, but there are other things you can do now in this new version of Temur for Dragonstorm that I'm excited about. So let's talk about some of these cards. All these cards are great. The Saga, Temur Battlecryer, SD Dragonclaw, it's going to be a really fun build around in draft, and then obviously like the dragon is really good. So what is Temur trying to do? If we look at the emblematic cards, love this card. He's a common, he's a good elephant man. I think I'm going to cast this a lot in draft regardless what clan I'm playing. We have a 5 in a green Duciat Earthcarver. It's a 4/4 with reach. It's good. When this creature enters, it endures 3. So endure is the keyword for Abzan, but we can talk about it now for the purposes of this card. Endure means you have your choice of putting a +1/+1 counter equal to the number of endure. So in this case, it's 3. You get 3 +1/+1 counters on it, or you can make a 3/3 white spirit creature token. Notably, it's very confusing, but the spirit tokens that are made from endure do not have flying. Typically, when we hear spirit in white, we think flying. These don't have flying. But the reason I think this card is great is a lot of the time I'm going to cast it, and it's going to be a 7/7 reach in a world where dragons are flying around, and most of the dragons, right, we're even looking at this really strong Temur dragon, Karakik Guardian, flying, vigilance, trample, yada yada. It's a 6/5. You know who can hold that back? Duciat Earthcarver. And you know who else he can hold back? Basically most of the set, because that card was stronger than most, but by and large, most of the dragons, like the Omen dragons, are going to be 4/4s or 3/3 flyers, and then a lot of the other uncommons are like 4/4s. That's it. If you're a 7/7 reach, you're going to be hard pressed to get past that. And then other times, if you don't feel like you need the reach or the counters, you can still get 7 power across 2 bodies. You get a 4/4 reacher, and you get a 3/3 ground companion. It's really good. I also have the Digger Island Dragon on again, because if you're playing Temur, it's this fun little race, or puzzle in your brain, I should say. It's not a race. It's a puzzle of how do I pick my moment to just fully strike, because you build all this big stuff, but big stuff with no trample gets easily chump blocked, and you do no damage, and then you get hit on the swing back. But you have to get into this little tempo groove, which I think some people haven't learned yet. I love to play this way. I really like playing blue-green a lot, actually, for that fact of playing big honkers, and then, oh, your enemy's rebuff, bounce your thing, clear out the blocker, maybe give something, you know, trample off of a spell, swing, you're dead, let's shuffle up, go to game 2, right? And so I put that on there to remind myself and to you that, like, this is what you're gonna need to do. You're gonna amass these big things, but there's gonna be all these tokens, all this stuff, all this chatter and chaff that can block you. You need to find ways to, like, clear the path so you can swing, which is why it makes it a little bit harder, which is why it falls down here. But I personally think this deck, especially for new players, is going to be a lot of fun, because it's always fun to play big, dumb idiots when you're starting out. But you now have potential to win with big, dumb idiots. Some of the other enablers here are Roamer's Routine. So you're going to search for a basic land, put it on the battlefield top. Cool. It has Harmonize, which we talked about already. Because again, if you have that 4/4 out, you could tap him, flash it back from the graveyard, pay 1 green, go fetch another land, put on the battlefield top. And ramping is going to be really important for Temur. You want to do that so you can get big, so you cast your big fatties, and then keep casting multiple spells. I have Rescue Leopard up here, which again is another common. It's a 4/2 for 3. Whenever this cat becomes tapped, you could discard a card if you do draw a card. Again, like we talked about on that other Temur card, the hybrid card. Discarding cards to draw cards is always useful. We call this rummaging in like Magic parlance, but it's even more impactful and more useful in the Temur shell because you have these harmonized cards and these renew cards that you can basically putting them in the graveyard is like drawing them, right? Because if you discard Roamer's Routine to the graveyard to the leopard to draw a new card, now it's also in your graveyard that you could cast it for later for harmonized. And let's say next turn, I keep saying like 4 is the number you want to get to for harmonized for power. Leopard has 4 power for 3, and then next turn you can pay 1 green, tap down your leopard, go fetch the land. It's like you cast it on delay, but you also drew a fresh card off of this. So there are these little interweavings that you got to find for value that I think is really interesting, and those are one of those 2 things that you're going to want to do a lot. Obviously, you probably want to cast the Roamer's Routine for 3 on turn 3 when you can, but it's nice to be able to pitch it and then draw a fresh card and still be able to cast it later. Some other cards in here. I'm going to go a little bit quickly. All these cards have Renew, so I'm jumping the gun again, but Renew is like the Sultai keyword. It basically just says if this creature's in the graveyard, you could pay the mana to renew it, and then they put counters on stuff. Counters plural, because sometimes there are cards that put multiple counters, like multiple +1/+1 counters, but also sometimes a +1/+1 counter and like a trample counter, which is really interesting. They haven't done this too much. This is probably going to be a little bit of a mess in paper, but again, on Arena, you're fine. But yeah, like this card, Champion of Doosan, it's a 4/2 for 3 in green, and it has trample, but if you pay 1 in the green, if it's in your graveyard, you can exile it, put a +1/+1 counter and a trample counter on target creature. So let's go back to our Duciad Excavator. Hello, you're a 7/7 reach. Remember I was saying like, oh, it's a great blocker, but can't get through because I'm staring at all these little idiots that want to block me and easily can. Well, now you renew the Champion of Doosan on the Earth Carver, and now it's an 8/8 trample reach. And now it's easier to say, okay, I'm attacking my 8/8 into your 1/1 or your pile of 1/1s, right? Like, they can all die. That's fine with me if you want, and you're still going to take damage. Same thing. Sagu Pummeler, I think, play this card a lot. It's a common. It'll be around. But 4/4 for 4 reach is a great rate baseline, especially, like I said, just keep thinking, just keep assuming the best dragons are 4/4s. So if you match that, great. If you're better than that, awesome. And this card has Renew. So play 4 in a green, exile this card, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, and it gets a reach counter. So now we can basically do a Build-A-Bear Duciad Earth Carver thing where let's say the roles are reversed and I have Champion Doosan on the board. I have Sagu Pummeler in the graveyard. I renew it. 2 +1/+1 counters. So now it's a 6/4. Still has trample, but now it also has reach. So now, you know, all those 3/3 dragons, good luck. And then the 4/4 dragons, my guy will also die, but now they have a decision to make, like, do I even want to attack into that? The Pummeler is going to be really great. The Enoch Wayfarer is a reference to Seder Wayfarer and others that have come before it. It's a 1/1 for 1 in the green. Doesn't sound great, but hold on. When this creature enters, mill 3 cards. So take the top 3 cards of your deck, put them in the graveyard. Does that sound bad? To a lot of new players, yes. But as someone who lives to play from the graveyard, this is what we're doing. And then it says you may put a land card from among them into your hand. If you don't, this gets a +1/+1 counter. A lot of times you want to play this on 2. Do not be scared. And flip 3 cards. Hope that you see a land in the 3. And then you get to basically, you tutor up a land. Really useful. It's thricely useful that you have Renew cards in your deck. So let's just say, for example, you play Wayfarer, you flip a Forest, a Sagu Pummeler, and a Champion of Doosan. Oh man, that is great. Probably would have liked to have one in your hand to play it and then let it naturally die and go to the graveyard, but that is great. You drew a land, and you now found 2 Renew cards in your graveyard that you can eventually put counters on and keyword counters on. Super, super good. I saved the best for last, and then we will move on, of my favorite enablers. And this card, think of me when the first time someone beats you with this card, because I am going to, it might be me, I'm going to be jamming this card a lot. This card is called Veteran Ice Climber, and it is a 1/3 for 2 mana. It has Vigilance. It cannot be blocked. And whenever this creature attacks up to one target player mills cards equal to this creature's power. So currently, as it stands, it's a 1/3. It has Vigilance, which I think is going to be super good since there's going to be a lot of tokens running around. So you can attack for 1, mill them for 1, or mill yourself for 1, because again, in a deck in Temur, you're going to have Renew cards, or Harmonize cards, or both. And they take 1. Okay, that's a great base. That opens up a whole lot of worlds. If you want to get crazy, you can mill your opponent. But how about, what if we live in a world where Ice Climbers is like a 3/5, right? And that's not even that hard to do in this set, because again, going back to the Pummeler, if we renew onto the Ice Climber, so give it 2+1/+1 counters, it has reach too, so that's even great. So it's a 3/5 reach, which again is going to block a ton of 3/3s and 4/4 flyers. But every time I attack, I'm milling you for 3, and that's when you turn it on your opponent. At first, I was milling myself for fun to find renew cards. Now I'm going to mill you out. I'm either going to kill you with damage or I'm going to kill you with mill. I think this card is going to be so awesome. I think it's so well designed. I love it. I'm going to play a ton of those. So the one thing I want to talk about when you're playing big stuff is you need to worry about your big stuff. Again, this is why it's lower on the list. One, it's hard to punch through with damage, but also it's just like sometimes it's a big waste of resources to be like, okay, I tap 6 mana, Earth Carver, make it a 7/7, reach, I can block any of your stuff, go, and your opponent just untaps and like, cool, I don't care, I kill it for 3 manas. You know, like half the mana you spent casting, I killed it. You thought I was going to block, it's totally not, you're taking damage now, and they maybe even played something else. So this card is super good, but you are going to at least want a copy of this in your Temur deck, and that is Snakeskin Veil. It is a 1 green instant that puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end turn. So putting the counter on is super good, especially it seems like there's a lot of counters matters cards in this format. But hexproof means it's going to blank a kill spell. So let's go back on that example. Let's say you have 7 mana. I tap 6 of it, play the Earth Carver, holding up my forest, I'm holding my Snakeskin Veil. Pass the turn. Your opponent goes, cool, I don't care, I kill it. And you say, well, you should care about this. And you tap the green mana, give it Snakeskin Veil. Again, as it's targeted on the stack, it is not dead yet until you say, okay, that resolves. So while it's still on the stack, you can cast Snakeskin Veil on top. It'll resolve first. Your creature gets hexproof. Even though it's targeted, it will be blanked. It'll effectively counter it. And they still have spent their mana. They will not have got the result they wanted, and your creature won't be dead. Super useful. That's the defensive vein. In the offensive vein, we have Wingspan Stride again. Just draft this card. This card's a common. It's freaking good. If you have a giant creature, again, if you don't have trample, maybe give your mammoth flying. You know, how many blockers are they going to have in flying, and how many blockers do they want to block with as you're crashing through the 7/7? It's a lot harder of a decision to put on your opponent than like, do I want to block with this like 1/1 token that I don't care about, right? So pick up copies of those. One of each would be nice for any effective Temur deck. I want to move on, but there is this really cheeky combo that I want to call it that I'm going to personally be trying to do at least once in the first 2 weeks of the format. Is there's this card called Dragon Brood's Relic. So 1 in the green. You could tap a creature to float any color mana, so that's useful for fixing. But it has this other ability where it says, pay 3 of any color, white, blue, black, red, and green. Sacrifice this, make a 4/4 dragon token that has flying, lifelink, and when this enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to any target. That seems cool, but it's a big cost. Again, it's 8 mana total in all 5 colors. Of course, only a sicko like me would be like, ooh, maybe we play this card. But there's a card in your colors in Temur called Iridescent Tiger that is 4 and a red, 3/4, but when it enters the battlefield, you get the mana back in all colors. So you get a white, blue, you float a white, blue, black, red, and green. The other thing to note is that you don't have to tap the relic to get the mana, so you could activate the relic to tap a creature to float another color, and then you play the the tiger, get all 5 colors back. That means you just have to have 2 extra mana, and if you do, you can pop the relic. It's just cute, but I think it'd be fun, and I do think that dragon's really good. Like, come in, shoot something for 3, whether that's kill a creature, do 3 to your opponent, then it's a 4/4 lifelink flyer. Just want to call that out for anyone that's looking for a cute little double uncommon combo to do. And it's more just a pat yourself on the back flavor win. It doesn't like win the game, but it could be cool. And now I'm just gonna talk about heavy payoffs. We're basically talking about Temur, but like look at Synchronized Charge. Just another way to push through damage because, again, we're looking for cards that say trample. So this card, 1 has Harmonize, so you can cast it twice, or you could throw it away to like your Rummage Cat and use it later because it gives your creatures counters and 2 of them Vigilance and Trample. So you just hopefully win the game with that swing, close the door, boom. Also Constrictor Sage. This has Renew as well because, again, we're caring about that. When it enters the battlefield, you can tap a creature, put a stun counter on it, or you can exile it from the graveyard and put a stun counter on it. So this is just a way to clear relevant blockers to, again, get damage through. Main build around for Temur is going to be a Tuned Hunter. So it's already a 3/3 trample for 3 base. Again, great. But whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, you can put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So this is basically saying, like, if you harmonize, if you renew, these cards are physically leaving the graveyard, this will trigger, it'll get a +1/+1 counter. This card could get big pretty fast. I mean, if you harmonize twice in a game or renew once and harmonize once, it's a 5/5 trample, assuming it's been on the field and it sees you do that, and it can only get bigger, and it itself already has trample. So like we keep talking about, like, we need this trample to make this work. It already has trample. And then, you know, if you have Sage of the Fang, which I think this card is going to come up also in Abzan, but it's relevant here. It's a 2/2 for 3 when this card enters. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That's nice, and notably you could put it on yourself, so it could essentially be a 3/3 for 3. But if you pay 3 and a green, you can exile from your graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then double the amount of counters that are on that creature. So if you have a Toon Hunter out, and you have the 2 counters, and you renew Sage of the Fang, it's going to get that 3rd counter, then double, so that'll be 6 counters afterwards. So you're looking at a big guy. Now let's go to 3. So now we're in the middle. The top 3, I think, all are super relevant to play, all worth trying. Yeah, so let's just get into it. It is Mardu. Mardu maybe should be higher, and maybe it's just my bias, but I think it's right to be perfectly in the middle, because I think for new players, you're going to want to play that, and then also people that are just trying to bulldoze people in the first, like, week or 2 on Arena, Mardu's probably the way you want to go, because you always want to skew aggressive. Mardu's 3-word synopsis is go-wide surprise, and we'll talk about what the surprise means in a little bit, but definitely the go-wide thing. Their keyword is mobilize, which is kind of like what Nick's been doing when you watch him play the Caesar deck. Cards with mobilize, when they attack, they make tokens equal to the amount of mobilize, and so that gets better. Like if there's a card with mobilize 2, that means when it attacks, it's making 2 guys. It's not just always making 1. So obviously the higher the mobilize, the better the card for that effect. And also you do have to sacrifice them at the end step, so we'll talk about getting around that and generating extra value out of that as we go down and talk about this clan a little bit deeper. But the reason I have this in the middle, and it's probably, I'm letting my bias show a little bit, but it's okay, it's my list. And this definitely could be in top 2 contention. I just put it right here in the 3rd just because, one, I think people are going to be playing this, especially in the first like week or 2, to really just get some wins in, jam games faster, play games faster, etc. But also, I think it's very new player friendly. Right, you're not having to worry about like how exactly am I sequencing these things, how once I stop my opponent do I get in, or with your teamer you're wondering like, once I make these big things and kind of make these tough trades, how am I now going to get these big things across the finish line before dying? Mardu just says, let's just get out there and get busy with it. So that is a lot easier to play, and also like it just helps too if you're a new player. Even if you're a experienced player, at big tournaments, pros will play aggressive quick decks because that gives them more time to rest their mind, because tournaments and even just a single game of Magic can be very taxing on the mind and grindy. So the more that you're thinking less but constantly keeping your opponent under pressure is going to net you extra value in other ways, right? Nick typically loves to play this Mardu clan color shell of just like constantly, I'm just going to keep coming after you, and at some point something's going to break and I'm going to have my way. Yeah, really think into Mardu. A couple emblematic cards here is this Dragonback Lancer. So it's a 3/3 for 4, it has flying, and then it also has mobilize. So the one thing you do have to think about is like you do have to send your mobilized creature into the red zone to get the trigger, so there's always a chance that it can get killed. And as the opponent of the Mardu player, you probably do want to make blocks in a way that it will get killed so it doesn't keep happening, right? But this card being a flyer is pretty good because that ensures that I can maybe get in for some more attacks than one on the ground. Another emblematic card here is Riling Dawnbreaker, and Hunter was actually just sitting right here telling me how much he loves this card, and I have to agree. On the Omen side, it's 1 in a white, and it makes a 2/2 white soldier token, so that is definitely a card that you wouldn't mind shuffling back in your deck, drawing again, and playing again in this type of deck, just going wide, making more tokens. And then later, for the dragon side, it is a 3/4 flying vigilance creature that at the beginning of combat, another target creature you control gets +1 until end of turn. This card reminded me of the card Combat Professor from Strixhaven, which I believe costs 1 less, but it was a 3/4, or I think it was a 2/3. But it could give target creature +1/+0 and vigilance until end of turn. Notably, it could target itself. The Dawnbreaker can't. But anyway, that card was really good in draft in that format, and black-white aggro was a popular archetype in that format. So Dawnbreaker is kind of giving me shimmers of that. There's also just a lot more stuff to potentially buff because you have a lot of tokens. And so I think this card is going to be very good. It's going to be very annoying as the top end of a Mardu curve. And then here we go. We have like Sonic Shrieker, really cool card. The Bone Cairn Butcher, also really, really strong. Attacking creatures getting Death Touch. And then we have Zurgo, who's obviously the clan leader of Mardu. And then Inevitable Defeat. That card, I'm just tell you right now, I'm going to be splashing that card a lot. I don't really care what colors I'm playing. That card is so good. There's not a lot of counters in this format. Like, you don't have to worry about the counter costs. Obviously, it's nice. You have peace of mind that it will never be countered. But exiling anything that's not a land, and they lose 3 life, and you gain 3 life, is a hell of a swing at instant speed for 4 mana. I am going to grab this card and play this card basically in any deck. Again, we'll talk about that more probably in a different video in terms of like when to jump, how to evaluate certain cards, like to really be like, I don't care, I'm playing this card, it's that good. And then other cards are like, yeah, you probably don't want to make yourself come up with 2 other mana symbols to put this in your deck. Just wanted to call out Inevitable Defeat, though. It is worth it. Oh, also Siegebreaker. Mardu Siegebreaker is insane. I mean, just read that card for a second. It's insane. But let's say, all right, what to play Mardu? Harry said, I'm a new player. Nick has a lot of success with it. Maybe I should play that. What are some cards you should look for? So there's Bearer of Glory, which is a 2/1 for 2. It's a human soldier, and during your turn, this creature has first strike. That's annoying. And then it has this Anthem effect where it says play 4 and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Notably, anytime you see a little colon next to something, that means it's activated ability. So if you're wondering about that in Commander and like cards that shut down activated abilities or whatever. But it also means there's no tap with it. There's no anything. It's just how much mana it costs to activate it. So if you have theoretically more mana to do this again, you can. So in late game stages when you're just hitting lands, you're like, oh, this sucks. At least this is a mana sink that if you ever get to 10 mana and you have creatures on the board, you could theoretically threaten to pump your team twice and give them all +2/+2. And again, that says creatures, not other creatures, so that counts Bearer as well. So this could be a 4/3 first striker, at least a 3/2 first striker. That's potentially also scary. But in a world where you're going very wide, you do want to have this ability to Anthem effect pump your team. We talked about the Lancer. Now there's also Shock Brigade, which is a 1/3 for 1 in the red. Menace, mobilized creature. This card's very interesting because it has a big toughness. I like that it has Menace, though, because, again, we want to get these mobilized ins, but we want them to survive so that they can potentially do it again. So having Menace is nice because sometimes your opponent just won't have 2 creatures to block that specific creature, so that means you're going to get in and then get the mobilized trigger. I have Underfoot Underdogs on here as well. It's a very interesting array of words on this card. It's a 1/2 for 3, which isn't great, but when it enters the battlefield, it makes a 1/1 red goblin token. Okay, that's nice. And then you pay 1, tap it, and then target a creature. Target creature with 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So a lot of times we see this kind of Goblin Surveyor effect in red cards. Usually they cost 3, but typically you just tap the creature and then give another creature unblockable that has 2 or less, or maybe Goblin Tunneler is what I'm thinking of. But it is something of note that the underdogs cost 1 in addition to tapping it. That's a real cost, especially when you're trying to cast multiple things or hold up mana for tricks. That does suck, although a lot of the time you are going to be doing this to get somebody like your Shock Brigade in, or somebody like your Bearer of Glory in for damage, but then also potentially to trigger mobilize without having to worry. So I think it is a little bit better in this set, which is why they're making it cost 1. Also notably, you can do a little trick where, let's say you have the Underfoot Underdogs and the Shock Brigade on the field. Currently, the Shock Brigade is a 1/3. You can pay 1, tap it, target the Shock Brigade because it currently has power 2 or less, and now it's unblockable. Now it's unblockable this turn. Doesn't matter what happens after that. So a cute little trick is you give it unblockable when it's weak, and you go to attacks before damage, you can still cast a pump spell or a trick to make it bigger, and they will still have to take the damage. Keep that in mind if you're going to be a Mardu maneuverer, okay? And then 2 other cards here that I think are worth mentioning is the Fortress Kingguard. It is a 1/2 for 1 and a white dog soldier. When it enters Endure 1, we talked about Endure during the Temur portion, and so that's either going to make a 1/1 token or put a +1/+1 counter on it. Again, helping us go wide, sometimes going a little tall if you need to put the counter on it. And then Nightblade Brigade, great rhyming name, but also it is a good card because it's a 1/3 Death Toucher for 3. It also has Mobilize 1, and then when this creature enters, Surveil. So the Surveil is a nice little bonus, but having Death Touch and Mobilize and being a good blocker makes this card pretty strong in my opinion. So, but really, you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and you just want your opponent to take damage. What's going to matter if you're going to play Mardu is talk to me about removal, talk to me about tricks. This is the surprise portion of Mardu that I was referring to. And this is what's going to matter a lot. Again, you could show me a Shock Brigade. You could tell me, oh, I'm playing Mobilize. I'm playing Mardu. This is like my deck. I'm like, okay, sure. If you just play a couple creatures that if you were to attack, maybe you make a guy, doesn't necessarily win the game because, again, I could be playing Temur, could have bigger stuff with bigger butts and be like, sure, attack me. Remember, I, as the opponent, get to choose how I block. I don't block necessarily the way that you want me to. That would be worse for me or better for you. And so this is when you need to have this cheap removal to really press the advantage. So 2 cards that I want to talk about first are just straight up removal. So Coordinated Maneuver, you can either destroy enchantment or you can deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. It's nice that I could target the random planeswalker you might see in the draft, but theoretically your board should be really wide, maybe a 4, 5, 6 creatures. If this is doing 5 damage for 1 and a white at instant speed, that's going to kill most things, especially most things that you care about removing. So that's good. Worthy cost is good because you're making a lot of these little bodies, right? Let's say you play this Fortress Kin Guard and you make the 1/1 off of it on turn 2. They play this crazy thing on turn 4, and you let's play worthy cost. You say, cool, I'm going to sack this token that I basically got for free off the dog anyway, and then I'm going to exile your Ugin or your, well, it's turn 4, it's not Ugin, but exile like something I really want to deal with, a really scary creature or a really scary planeswalk. That's a nice way to leverage the tokens that you're getting for free because, again, worthy costs 1 black, but it also comes with that extra cost of having to sack a creature. 2 more things before we fully talk about the tricks thing is I want to mention Summon Intimidator is just another good card. It's a 4/3 reach creature in red. Same thing. If I want to see 4 power when I'm talking about a creature that has reach, this card has that. It's going to at least threaten to trade a lot of potential scary dragons out there. And then for one time, when it enters the battlefield, you can make target creatures full on be able to block. So that could also be a good card to help you push through a bunch of damage to potentially put them on Death's Door. Okay, so sequence your Summon Intimidator accordingly. And another 4-drop card that I think is going to have a lot of utility in this deck and beyond is Arashian Sunshield. When this card enters the battlefield, you exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. That doesn't read too crazy, but what have we talked about this whole time? Renew, Harmonize. This card could come in, hit 2 cards that really matter in their graveyard. You get to get rid of 2 Renew creatures in person's graveyard. That throws off a lot of their game plan. That throws a lot of their capability to make their creatures more scary. And we haven't even talked about what the creature actually does. That's just like the benefit of casting it. It's a 3/4 for 4, which is great. And then you can pay 1 white, tap a creature. Historically, in these go wide kind of little guy, it's kind of referred to white weenie decks with like pump, there's always going to be this guy. Usually it's a 1 or 2 drop. In this format, it's a 4 drop that also has a decent defensive stat, but it's always played its part. If there's one decent blocker, you just tap it down, tap them down, and attack. Sometimes you want to put them in a tough position, tap down their weakest blocker, force their best blocker to block, and then blow them out, which is a perfect segue to talk about the tricks part. Surprise! We have a lot of scary cards for Mardu. A lot. And all of them are common or uncommon. The first one is a common, Alesha's Legacy. 1 in a black, target creature you control gains Death Touch and indestructible until end of turn. If you just came out of Aether Drift Draft, you know how annoying this card is. I don't even remember what the card was called in Aether Drift, but I know I got it cast a lot against me, and then I started casting it a bunch against people. I think the most success I had was playing a combination of red-black and being pretty aggressive. And if you had 2 copies of this card, basically I trophied every time. This is going to be just as good, maybe a little bit less, because in Aether Drift, you just naturally always stalled out. So it was always heartbreaking at some point when you finally attacked and your opponent lined up blocks and you just blew them out with this trick. This is still going to be a blowout every time because your creature's not dying and theirs isn't, right? We could get cute and you attack with Shock Brigade, make the Mobilize token. I have a 3/3 as my only blocker. I can't block the Shock Brigade, so I'm going to block the 1/1. I'm like, I'm just going to eat this token. And I say, no, you're not. I'm going to cast Alesha's Legacy on my token. Your guy dies. Mine doesn't. from combat. You have to sack it later. That's huge blow, and that can only exponentially get worse for your opponent. That was a really, really tame example, right? Let's say you block with my 4/4 legendary dragon. I'm like, well, I don't care. It's not going to die. Well, you're dead now. So you need to live in fear if you're playing into Mardu deck if they have 2 black mana untapped and they're attacking everything. But again, part of the problem with Mardu is they're most likely going to be attacking everything every time anyway. Good luck predicting it. And then, so 1 and a white, also instant speed. Duty Beyond Death. It says you have to sack a creature as additional cost to this. And it says creatures you control gain indestructible intent on a turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This card is going to frustrate me to no end. It's going to happen so much. You're not going to make any trades on board on blocks, and then they get bigger for later. And again, you do have to sacrifice a creature, but what's a goon to a goblin? Like, they have tokens that they don't mind sacking because they're going to have to sack them at the end of the end step anyway. Might as well save the rest of the team and put a counter on each of them. This card is really upsetting. Then we have Desperate Measures, which is a 1 black instant uncommon that says target creature gets +1/-1 until in a turn. When it dies under your control this turn, draw 2 cards. So this was what I was talking about with, and you can do it with Duty Beyond Death as well, with the trick of the end step. If you remember, if you were playing back then during Crimson Vow times and Midnight Hunt times, this is basically like a decay trigger. They come in attacking. If they survive combat at your end step, no matter what, you have to sack them, right? The decayed zombies. But there was a lot of funky stuff you could do before you got to the end step to still like sacrifice the token to draw cards or whatever. And that's the same thing here. So before you go to end step, do this in arena. After you attack, there's a second main phase where you can cast stuff, and then it'll go to end step. You should put a stopper on your end step. Before you get there, cast Duty Beyond Death, sack the token, put the counters on. Cast Desperate Measures, excuse me. Target your creature that or token that you have to sack, draw the 2 cards. Basically, it's Skull Clamp trigger. That's a nice way to make heads-up ways to get extra value from something. Okay, so keep that in mind. I just want to say, I know you're going to remember, you're going to forget, or it's going to go to end step too quickly before you can even do it, and it's just going to force you to sack them. You're going to be upset. Keep that in your brain, though. All these little things you can be doing, which is also why I brought up the block sacking thing. Like, once you get into, I'm going to block and sack before damage zone of playing, you've definitely leveled up a bit. And then that's the more that you do it, the more it's in your brain, the more you'll remember to make kind of heads up plays like that, or look for lines where you can make heads up plays like that. Okay, and then Purging Stormbrood, very, very, very good. This card is also incredible for a uncommon card. The Omen side is 1 and a white instant. Give it card creature +2/+2, hexproof, and lifelink until end of turn. Again, falls under the category of I would like to cast this and draw it again. And if you do, geez, man, it's going to be really heartbreaking for your opponent. And then the Dragon side is a 4/4 flyer for 5, but it also has ward. They have to pay 2 life to even target it. And then when this creature enters the battlefield, you can remove all counters from up to 1 target creature. So it's saying all counters because remember, Renew can put like keyword counters, so trample, lifelink, reach. You can remove those plus the +1/+1 counters from stuff, and that's very also backbreaking. But just on its face, even if it was a 4/4 for 5 flyer with ward 2, is great. So let's quickly talk about some of the cards you might want to look over for payoffs. Again, it doesn't really matter exactly how you get there, but you do want some of these. The Shocking Sharpshooter for 1 and a red. It's a 1/3 with reach. Whenever another creature you control enters, deal 1 damage to target opponent. So mobilize triggers this, obviously. So when you go to attack, you mobilize. Let's say you make 2 1/1s from the mobilize trigger. That'll be 2 separate triggers for Shocking Sharpshooter. Boom, 2 damage right to the face immediately to your opponent. And that can start as soon as turn 3, because you can play this on turn 2. That's going to be a lot of damage. That's going to add up also while you're just swinging every turn, threatening a bunch of damage. This card is very, very good if you're playing Mardu. The Unburied Earth Carver. I always love cards like this. It's a 2/2 for 2. Pay 2, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Usually in the past, this card has been like, it's cost like 1, or you don't have to pay anything, but you can only do it once per turn. So it's a little bit slower, but I think you had to balance it out because they know how many tokens you're making in this set, so that's fine. But again, if you have extra mana, and before you go to end step, and you still have a living mobilize token, just sack it to this guy, give it a +1/+1 counter, and let the good times roll and let this thing get pretty big. It's a good little payoff for this deck. Venerate Stormsinger, on the other hand, is not a fair card. It is a 3/3 Blood Artist for 4, basically. It has Mobilize 1, and it says whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So you could drain a ton with this because, again, the keyword on Mobilize is saying you are sacrificing this token. So if it doesn't die in combat, which would trigger this, you have to sacrifice at end step, which will also trigger this. And theoretically, you keep making more tokens. They keep getting drained. Maybe you also have the Sharpshooter. Like, it's only 20 life. So people are going to go down pretty fast. This card is great. Just, if you're playing black and you see this, take this card. Don't just only tell yourself it's a Mardu card. Like, we see this card all the time. Bastion Remembrance, Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat. Shout out all my drainers. They're always so good in Commander, in Limited, in Cube. This card's gonna be sick. Descend of the Storms is really scary. If you hit this early, it's a 2/1 for 1 white. And whenever this creature attacks, you can pay 1 in a white. And if you do, you can endure. So you can, again, put a counter on it or make a token. And then a couple other cards I want to talk about. This Starry-Eyed Skyrider gives all your attacking tokens you control of flying. It's a 1/3 flyer for 3. And then when it attacks, you can also give another creature flying. So like we talked about, this is a great enabler for your Mobilize stuff because if it doesn't already have flying, if you have this guy out, you could attack, give your Mobilize creature flying. That will trigger Mobilize. All the tokens you have made now have flying. That's going to translate to a lot of damage. And then Hardened Tactician and Salt Road Pack Beast are 2 creatures that will draw you a bunch of cards in this shell. Same trick, pay 1 to sack a token. Before you sack it to end step to draw the card. It's very nice. It also is a great blocker. And then Salt Road Pack Beast, if you have like 5 creatures on the field, this costs 1 white and it's a 4/3 that draws you a card. That's just nuts. That's just value, okay? All right. We've made it to the top 2. Thank you so much for sticking with me. We're still going strong. Hopefully you see how excited I am about this set. And I think you should be too. And I think if you really haven't drafted yet, but you want to, this is the set to jump in. I know that sounds like something just to say every set. I wasn't saying it for Aether Drift, and I was right. It was a grindy, punishing set. But this set seems very fun with a lot of avenues to play, and all of them could be good. And you can have a lot of like game-on-game drafts where you're just like, this card seemed amazing. And then I played this color and I had this other uncommon, and this card was amazing. Like, it's going to be the best time. Like I said at the top, I think they nailed it with this set in terms of just all of it. So, for number 2, it is Sultai. And again, I told myself a little bit, I said I'm showing some bias here by putting it 2. And I am, because I'm a Sultai guy. I love these colors. I usually, every time I sit down to pre-release, and these are what these are, by the way, these are the pre-release kits that you will get if you go to pre-release. I look down and I build and I look up and I'm either playing black-green or I'm playing blue-black. And in the sets that lets you play more than 2 colors, I'm playing blue-black-green. So I love the way this plays. I love the interaction with the graveyard stuff that it does, but also I think it's very strong, and I think I would rather be the 1 Sultai drafter at the table than the 2nd or 3rd Mardu drafter at the table, which is why Sultai's higher. But again, I really think Mardu is going to be strong. So if you already feel like you want to lean that way, or if, like I said, I think it's very beginner friendly, go for that. For Sultai, I didn't have to come up with a 3-word synopsis because Magic did it for me and put up this card. It says, "Death begets life." That is why I'm a Sultai player, baby. That is, the artwork is beautiful. The card is actually insane, coming to a Commander game near you. And it is just all things that I, personally believe in, I guess, in some ways. The keyword for Sultai is Renew, which we talked about briefly, but I also want to shout out one more card that has Renew called Karsi Revenant. It is a 3/3 for 1 black-black. It is flying, Death Touch, Lifelink, and it has Renew. You pay 2 and a black. You exile this card from your graveyard. You put a flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink counter on target creature. Remember the Earth Carver from a couple minutes ago? Picture that thing with all those words strapped on top of it. Yeah, this card's awesome. This is the second coming of Vampire Nighthawk, which, if you could put that up on the screen, if you've been playing long enough to know who Vampire Nighthawk is, I love you. And I love you, Vampire Nighthawk, because I had so much fun. That was one of the cards that really captured my imagination of like, oh my god, this is so awesome of a card, even though it was in and around sets that had like Lightning Strike and Lightning Bolt and in it, so that was the way to keep it in check. But in my kid brain, I was like, this card is so awesome, like nothing can beat it, nothing wants to beat it, and then it just feels great playing with. So it's great to see this card back again, and then the fact that you can give its keywords to a better creature, because again, 2/3 flyer, not bad on its face, but you put this on a 4/4, now it's a flying Death Touch lifelinker. Oh man, that is a lot. So yeah, you know, you see these gold cards, a lot of good reasons to lean into this set. You know, Fangkeeper's Familiar is a Sultai reference to Mystic Snake, which I think is really cool. And then this Keru Goldkeeper, again, this is another card. This card, Inevitable Feat, if you see this in a pack, you do whatever it takes to play this card, because if you actually cast this card, or in this case renew this card in your draft, you're probably winning. Just go take this and just do everything you can to grab some lands or like a couple monuments to make this playable, because this card is going to be an absolute house in the format. So what is Sultai trying to do? I kind of hinted at it a little bit, but it's going to be kind of, you're going to want to make a lot of trades. Death begets life. Death on the board translates to success for you as a Sultai player. So I had Caustic Exhale here, and again it has the Behold text on it, but this card just gives -3/-3 for 1 black, or 1 and 1 black if you don't have a dragon to show. Deal with stuff early. Agent of Kotis, again, we want to trade early, so this is a 2/1 when you first play it, and then let's say you trade with an early creature, you trade with one of Mardu's attackers, it goes in the graveyard, later you can renew it to make a future creature stronger. Cruel Truths is a card that lets you surveil, so obviously, you know, looking at cards and choosing to put them in the graveyard is very Sultai. Getting minimal value is also very Sultai, so that's why I put that here as an emblematic card. And then you have Feral Deathgorger, which I love this. I'm going to play this card so much. This and the Ice Climber are two cards that, like, if I had advanced stats on like my drafts, those are probably gonna be like 2 of my most played cards. But on the Omen side, it says put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you draw a card for 1 and a black at sorcery speed. And then for 5 and a black, the dragon side is a 3/5 flying Death Touch dragon. When this card enters, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. And again, remember, like I mentioned with the Bodyguard, that is not nothing. Exiling 2 cards from opponent's graveyard, it even can be yours if that will trigger something good for you, but I'm thinking mostly of targeting your opponent's graveyard so you can cut off their renew, cut off their harmonized targets, cut off their potential recursion is super big. Plus being a 3/5 flying Death Touch mostly blocks everything, kills everything that it comes in contact with. So when you're playing Sultai, you want to survive by kind of having things die and extending things to the late game. So yeah, here I have, like, you probably want to play Dragon's Prey, which is basically a murder. So it's destroy target creature for 2 and a black at instant speed, but it costs 2 more to cast if you're targeting a dragon. But even, again, 5 mana at instant speed to kill a dragon that's going to be a problem at common is super good. The Devotees is really good. We talked about those earlier, but I just want to call it out again because this is a Death Toucher. So you can play that early. As long as you're not playing against a lot of guys that, you know, have 1 power that are going wide, this could favorably block a bigger, better thing that also might just make your opponent hold back because they don't want to deal with it. I think this Krotik Nest Guard is really good. Well, it is really good. It's a 4/4 defender for 3, and then you could pay 2 and a green to let it attack, because if it has defender, it means it can't attack. It can only block. So that's kind of interesting. I haven't seen a lot of cards like this, at least at this power level. Usually they're like 2 drops, and then there's another restriction that lets it attack. But this being a 4/4 for 3, and then you could just pay mana at any time to let it attack is interesting. And then I know it took me a long time to come to this card, but Dragon Sniper is 1 green. It's a 1/1, but it has Vigilance, Reach, and Death Touch. This card seems really good because obviously it has Reach and has Death Touch. So again, it could trade with any dragon and be very powerful. I think the Vigilance is kind of funny because you're probably never really attacking with this, because there's always going to be something that has, like, is a 2/2 or like has a 1/1 token on the other side of the field. So they'll easily block because they'll easily trade in their random 2/2 to kill your 1/1 Death Touch, especially knowing they're going to play bigger stuff. So this card is good, but I think it's less good than it seems like it would be in other times in other formats. However, you know, still a 1/1 Death Toucher with other keywords it's relevant, and you know, this is a set where you could potentially put more counters on it. So if it's a 3/3 Vigilance, Reach, Death Touch, then yeah, that's a lot of stuff going on for this. But I just want to call it out because all these things you want to just keep trading, right? It's kind of like almost like the chess mentality of just like trading until you get yourself in a spot where you want, because you need to stall a bit. So you need creatures on the ground to trade with their potentially aggressive things. But now let's talk about stuff the mulch, the stuff in the graveyard that we want in the graveyard. So either by discarding or playing it early to trade to then renew. So we have Alchemist's Assistant. It's a 2/1 for 1 and a black. It is a monkey with lifelink, and then you can renew. So for 1 and a black, you can exile it, put a lifelink counter on target creature. It can't be overstated how much just gaining life is useful in draft, because again, we're in a heads-up game, you know, we're small decks, but you can't reliably draw like the cards you exactly expect to draw at the right time in a draft, and you're at 20 life, so a lot of times like you'll go to 7, you're just like, I got a lot of stuff I can do, I can turn this game around, but I just physically can't because the clock is so on top of me because I don't have that much life left. And then all of a sudden you give a 4/4 or 6 lifelink, and then you just hit and you're like, I'm back in the game, like this is fine. And then by putting the lifelink counter on it, as long as it keeps living, that gives you the possibility to keep gaining life, and that's huge. We talked about Champion of Doosan again, which I think is worth mentioning here, because again, it's a 4/2 for 3, so you can play this early, trade with a lot of stuff, and you want it to die because later you could put the +1/+1 counter and trample counter on something. We also talked about Sage of the Fang, which will be good here, especially if you get a fair amount of renew stuff. It's going to be its best in Abzan, so I'll save that to really talk about it one more time at the end. But I haven't talked about this Crocodile. He's a good little guy. He's got a fancy little carapace sash or something, but he's a 5/3 for 4 and a black. When he dies, you make a 2/2 black zombie druid token, and then you could pay 1, exile it, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That is kind of like, he's kind of the mascot for Sultai right there. Die, make a zombie, and then like make gator skin boots armor for a future creature for 1 black mana. So how do we enable this? We talked about the Enoch Wayfarer. Definitely play this card. You probably want at least 2 in the Sultai deck. We have Rainveil Rejuvenator, who is an elephant druid. It's a 2/4 for 3 and a green. When it enters, you mill 3, and then you could tap it, add green mana equal to this creature's power. So currently it's 2. Again, you could, with Renew, you could make it bigger, you could tap for more mana. But this card does a lot. Comes down after you like your 2-drop, your 3-drop traded with some of their early stuff. You play this, now it's a big creature that can wall off a lot of stuff. It'll start fueling your graveyard for renew triggers, and then it also can help you cast stuff later on. So this card does a lot. Again, we talked about Veteran Ice Climber. It's going to be at its best here. I'm going to be playing it a lot. And then another card, I haven't really talked about the Dragonstorm enchantment cycle of cards, but this one was definitely worth the mention in Sultai because it's probably one of the best, if not the best, because it costs 1 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, you could draw 2 and discard a card, and then whenever a dragon enters the battlefield, you could bop this back to your hand to cast it again. And again, drawing 2, discarding card is really useful just in general. Like, you'd love to draw 2 and then just discard your contextual worst card at the time. But obviously in here, there are specific cards that you do want to dig for and then throw into the graveyard, specifically in Sultai. It's a nice, reusable, recoupable chart, of course, because assuming you'll have a couple dragons in your deck. Couple more cards that help enable. Essence Anchor. This card is really interesting. It's a 2 and a blue and artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 1, so it's going to help do a little bit like card advantage in air quotes, but again, being able to actively put the card in the graveyard if you wish is very helpful. And then you could tap it, make a 2/2 black zombie token, and activate only during your turn and only if a card left your graveyard this turn. So card's funky because you get the surveil every turn, which is nice, but you also want to feel like you're getting zombies from it, and the only way you can get zombies from it if you did exile a card, which again, like if there was an effect, like if you played the Death Gorger and you exiled a card yourself from your own graveyard, then you can make it 2/2, or if you renewed a creature, then you could tap, make it a 2/2. I still think if you have a deck of like 3 is probably the low end, but 4+ renewed targets, creatures in your deck, it's probably worth playing, and then you can just make some zombie tokens. I am curious to see how good and useful the 2/2 zombies are in this set, because it seems like there's a lot of stuff running around, there's a lot of power, so we might find that the juice isn't worth the squeeze on the 2/2s, but for now, it seems like a good enabler and a good way to give you some stuff. Then 2 curveball ones, well, not really curveball ones, but I think I mentioned at the top that I'm going to be playing a lot of Sultai base with splashing white, right? And so here's one example of that. The Yathan Road Watcher, again, it's a gold card, or it's a rare, so I'm not always going to be able to do it, but if I see it, I'm not going to be scared to grab it because it'll be really good in my deck. It's a 3/3 for 1 in Abzan colors. When it enters the battlefield, if you casted it, you get to mill 4 cards, and when you do, you return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it just does a little soft reanimate, which my Sultai heart is a little sad that the Abzan card got a reanimate ability and not the Sultai card, but that's why I'm just going to steal it and put it in my deck. And then lastly, for enablers, Watcher of the Wayside. It's a colorless 3-drop artifact golem that is a 3/2, and when it enters, target player mills 2 cards, and then no matter what, you gain 2 life. So again, saw this near the end and I was like, oh yeah, I should put this in because any deck could reach for this. This is a common colorless card. You could put it in if you need to start milling stuff. So I would even put this in the Temur deck if you have a ton of renew, because it's worth just flipping 2 over and seeing if you hit a renew card and going that way. So some payoffs. This is really just about the value. I mean, one interesting, we talked about a 2 and Hunter. That's obviously going to be very good as long as you have some harmonize, but specifically more renew cards. And then this 100 Battle Veteran is a 4/2 for 3 and a black, but it says as long as there are 3 or more different kinds of counters among creatures you control, this creature becomes a 6/6. It gets +2/+4, and it's base of 4/2. So it becomes a 6/6 for 4 if on the field at one point you have a +1/+1 counter, like let's say a trample counter, a flying counter. It just says at least 3. So again, Corsi Reverent does all of that by himself if you were to have that in your deck and renew it. I think this card is interesting, and I think a lot of people aren't going to want to read it all the way to put it in their decks, but I think you'll see it pop up a little bit later in the draft. So a lot of times you're just going to look up and be like, oh, this is just a 6/6 a lot of the time. And it also says you can cast this card from your graveyard if you do bring it out with a finality counter. So funny enough, recasting it from the graveyard will put a counter on itself, which now asks you to only have 2 other types of counters, maybe a +1/+1 counter and like a trample counter or reach counter. So I think this card's actually quite good. It just reads a little weird, but in practice it's going to play very well, especially in this deck specifically. I wanted to shout out Awaken the Honored Dead. I know I said I was going to talk about too much about rares, but I didn't really talk about all the sagas that are in play. All the sagas and the sieges are pretty good. Like if you see them, which again I'm not bringing up because I'm going to let you mess around with those and find what you like and have fun with that. But just looking at them, they all look really good. The sieges for sure. Every single siege is good. They have 2 modes on each. Whatever you pick at the time that's going to serve your game the best, I think you'll have great results. And then most of the sagas seem pretty good. But I wanted to call it Awaken the Honor Dead. It's the Sultai saga, so it costs black, green, and blue Sultai colors. And it just reminded me of Sultai Charm from Khan's block, because the first mode is destroy target non-land permanent, and then part 2 you mill 3 cards, and then you can discard a card if you do return target creature or land from your graveyard to your hand. So that's obviously a great emblematic Sultai card. Which now brings me brings me to the very last clan of recommendation and power, and that is obviously Abzan. If you notice, this one's already open, funny enough, because Hunter already cracked it open and started building his deck because he was so excited to get his hands on some Abzan. For good reason. Abzan was Khans. Khans was Siege Rhino, and it was very good. And so because of that, my 3-word synopsis for Abzan is the Rhino's back. And not Siege Rhino specifically, but it's Skirmish Rhino, who is the Abzan color, so white, black, and a green. It's a 3/4 trampler. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent, which matters if you're going to be playing Two-Headed Giant on pre-release weekend, loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This was also done by our friend of the channel, James Balzema. And yeah, this card is awesome. Siege Rhino was really awesome, and it impacted standard in a huge way, obviously, but the limited was really good too. Like Abzan was one of the best because you just kept getting more value with the counters, which is why I'm glad they spread out the counters to, like, you know, seems like Temur can get some counters, Sultai can get some counters, and then Abzan's like, oh, we're still doing the counters, don't worry, we just kind of let other clans touch it a bit, so we're not the runaway favorite. But in the dark, you gotta go with the incumbent champ, so I picked Abzan. Keyword is endure. We talked about it, which makes sense because, like I'm telling you, Abzan's all about making +1/+1 counters, so you have the choice of either putting a +1/+1 counter on something or making a token. So we talked about the Fortress Kinguard already as a card to kind of tell you what's going on. I put another card up here called Delta Bloodflies, which is a 1 and 2 for 1 in black. It's a flyer, and it says whenever this creature attacks, you control a creature with a counter on it, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's a nice little dink and drain card on attack trigger. There's going to be a good chance any point in the game you're going to have a counter on something thanks to the Endure cards or cards that just physically put +1/+1 counters on it, and then you're going to get them drained. So look at all these fun cards that you could get. Let's say you open the pack and you see the Felithar, or you see the Severance Priest, or you see the Armament Dragon. You grab that and you're like, okay, like I want to do Abzan. Good choice. Now, what are we going to do about it? Well, you need to look at the enablers. So I think, oh, sorry, no, I talked about, so for Sultai, just to recap, Sultai is probably the most flexible. You need to be base green, and then it's green or black, whatever you get it, or green or blue. And for Mardu, you probably want to lean more red, white, and then have black be some of your mobilized creatures that you can find, and then the tricks like we talked about, the Alesha's Legacies and stuff like that. In Abzan, I believe you're going to be base green black, just because a lot of the like double color cards that are best for Abzan are green black, so I'm going to talk about them right here. Some of the best enablers. Host of the Hereafter is a 2/2 for 2 green and a black. But let's see why the disparity. Great art, by the way. It says this creature enters with 2 +1/+1 counters. Okay, so it was always a 4/4. We just had to wait to keep reading. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters on up to 1 target creature you control. Obviously bonkers, so it comes down, it's a 4/4, but it has 2 counters, so if it were to die, you get to take those 2 +1/+1 counters and put it onto a different creature, so just keep the money moving, right? And then Stalwart Successor is also a Golgari card. It's a 1 black and a green. It's a 3/2 with Menace. And it says whenever one or more counters are put on a creature you control, if it's the first time counters have been put on that creature this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So basically saying like every time you go to put a counter, if it's the first time, you put an additional one, which again is great because you're carrying on putting on counters, and then this will see you put on counters and it's like, keep the change, put an extra one on. So that card's great. Also on itself, it has Menace, so really the one time you put a counter on this gets a counter. If it's the first time, you get another counter and it becomes a 5/4 all of a sudden with Menace. Like that card is scary. And so now we gotta look at ways to put on more counters. One really easy one is Lightfoot Technique. It's 1 in a white. It says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Gains flying and indestructible until end of turn. An average thing that could happen for you is you could play Stalwart Successor on turn 3, untap, turn 4, play the Lightfoot Technique on it. Well, actually, what you should do is not show it first. You should go to attack. If they want to block, they'll block with 2 creatures because they have to as Menace. Then you say, cool, Lightfoot Technique. I'm trying to give it a +1/+1 counter and a flying and indestructible, but since this is the first time I'm putting a +1/+1 counter, it's going to get 2. And then your opponent goes, okay. And then this becomes a 5/4 Menace, flying indestructible until a turn, but it keeps the counters, and then you just kill like the 2 things they block with, and then your guy survives, and you keep it moving. Lightfoot Technique is also going to be a very upsetting card to play against. We talked about Unburied Earthcarver, so again, that's a slower, fairer, but honest man's work way to get counters on a creature. It can only go to that creature, but a lot better in Abzan. And then we also talked about Descendant of the Storms. That card can endure and put counters on itself and Duty Beyond Death. So a lot of splash over from kind of the Mardu side of things, but you want to be more proactive with putting the counters on because hopefully you have some of those uncommon cards that are caring about the amount and how many counters are going on things, and then getting triggers that way. I do think Dragon Sniper is great here, which like I mentioned, the Sultai, you do want to play in Sultai to try to wall off stuff early, but it's exceptionally good in Abzan because again, same thing, it can wall off stuff, but in this color pairing you have a lot more opportunities to put counters on it. And like I said, as like a stress test thing, if you get this to a 3/3, so if you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it and it becomes a 3/3 Vigilance, Reach, Death Touch, now we're really talking about a serious card, and you can keep going from there. So I do think it's best in this format. I obviously think anyone who's playing green that sees this will probably take it and put in their deck, and that's fine, but the keywords, the triple keywords, really matter in Abzan because of the amount to just keep pumping counters on it. Just want to call that out. And then another card, Inspired Vanguard, which I missed the first go around. It's a 3/2 for 4 and a green, but when it enters or attacks, it can endure 2. So you could essentially let it enter, come with 2 +1/+1 counters, which again might matter because you might have one of those Golgari cards watching, but at least at its face, it could be a 5/4, and then when it attacks again, it could turn into a 7/6, or you can make it 2/2. I think people are going to see 3/2 and 5 cost mana and just be like, that's not really what I'm into, but I missed this too. Like I'm saying, it says or attack, so you will get it when it enters, but also every time you attack, you have that option of putting 2 more counters on it or making a body, a 2/2 body, and I think this card is going to be quite good. So I have a couple more cards to show here on how to get more counters. We'll put them up on the screen. We've talked about all these other cards, except the Kin Tree Nurturer. It's a 2 and a black, 2/1 lifelink, and when it enters, it endures 1. So it could become a 3/2 lifelinker, or it could be a 2/1 with a 1/1 next to it. But again, with that lifelink in a deck that can put more counters on and extend the game, that card is very scary. And then Sandskidder Outrider is a 2 and a 1, or it's a 2/1 for 3 and a black. It has menace, and when this enters, it endures 2. So again, we could be talking about a 4/3 menace creature for 4. Always good to like walk these out in your mind and see how they might play out to better evaluate them. And we could talk about evaluating cards a little bit later down the road. Yeah, so now we're winding the corner here. So for removal, Kin Tree Severance, I talked about that at the top. Like, I'm going to be splashing for that in probably Sultai deck, and I'll probably have a Crazy Man game where I'm playing Temur, but I have a lot of fixing, and I'll probably throw it in there too, because it's that good. Just full stop, exile something that you care about because it's value 3 or greater. And then Knockout Maneuver is another way to put a counter on, which also doubles as removal. It says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control, then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls for 2 and a green. Notably, this is a punch, not a fight. Quickly, if your creature is just dealing the damage, it's called a punch because they're just hitting them. If it's a fight, both creatures do combat damage to each other. That's always kind of scary to open that can of worms, because your opponent could give their creature death touch, or just do something to blow you out. Punch is a lot more fair. They can still interact with it, but there's a less higher ceiling for things to go wrong when it's a punch. So this is a lot better that it's not a fight. So quickly look at a couple payoffs. Again, this one is kind of nice in the sense, like, it's the inversion of Mardu. Mardu is kind of like, you don't care exactly who the individual creature are because you're going wide. And I have all these tricks that I'm holding. I'm just trying to get you down to a spot where now you're forcing your opponent to make blocks they don't want to, and then that's when you get them. Abzan's like, I don't really care who the creature is. I'm going to try to build it up tall and make it the strongest, scariest thing it can be, while also killing stuff and doing some other things and grinding you down. But there are ways to help pave that road a little smoother, right? So Yasan Tomb Guard is a 2/3 for 2 and a black. It has menace, which we love. Whenever a creature you control with a counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card, use 1 life. That's awesome. We already saw a lot of cards, right? Like, I mean, let's imagine a world 2 or turn 2, you play the dog, the enduring whoever the hell, Fortress Kin Guard, not enduring, Fortress Kin Guard. You put the counter on it, so it's a 2/3. Your opponent doesn't play a blocker, and then you go turn 3 Tomb Guard. It attacks because it has a counter on it. Obviously you do too, but then you draw a card, lose a life, and then it just goes up from there. Love that. Ton of value. Great to play in this mid-rangey shell that Abzan, it already signs you up to be mid-range, by the way. Sage of the Fang, I said we talk about it when we get here. Obviously, like, every single card I've already read to you for Abzan says put a counter on this, put a counter on this. So Sage of the Fang's renewed trigger is going to be really great when you put a counter on something and then double all the counters on it. Card's going to be great. And it's an uncommon, so you can see it. I mean, hell, you could have 2 in a draft deck. That could be extremely scary in Abzan. Another card I want to call is Formation Breaker. Another one where it's probably going to take some time for you to just get beat by it before you fully respect it and put it in your own deck. But it's a 2/1 for 1 in the green. It says creatures with power less than this creature can't block it. And as long as you control a creature with a counter on it, this creature gets +1/+2. So this becomes a 3/3 for 2 as long as you have a creature with a counter on it, which, again, if we just look to the Fortress Kin Guard that I just mentioned, that's a 2-drop, that could put a counter on it, right? Lightfoot to anything we have, then we could just Lightfoot Technique something, put a counter on it. It's not that hard to do. There are a lot of cards that put counters on it, and we're not even talking about renew creatures that could put counters on stuff later. So this is a 3/3, and then I really like the text of creatures with less power than it can't block it. So all these little tokens that Mardu's making or the other Abzan deck is making, if you're bigger than it, you can't talk to me. You have to send somebody equal or greater power to block me, which then will open up avenues to at least trade another comparable big thing down, or to blow them out with a pump spell or a removal spell or something. And again, Anafenza, she's a rare, but I decided to call her out because she's really good, but also she was in old cons, and she is a 2/2 for 2 and a white. She's a legendary spirit soldier with flash, meaning you could cast this card at any time. It has first strike, and when another non-token creature you control dies, Anafenza endures 2. So when she sees a creature that's not a token die, you can either put 2 +1/+1 counters on her or make a 2/2 white spirit token. That card is going to be tough. And that is the end. I hope that this helped a lot. Go forth, fly with dragons, have fun in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Let me know what you're liking to see. Let me know if you want to see a follow-up report after I've got a couple belts under my draft, after I've got a couple drafts under my belt, and we can talk some more. But I would just say mess around. There's a lot of good stuff, and like I said, I rank them just for more for fun and for clarity's sake, for you, for suggestions, but by no means like is this the end-all be-all. And again, for you, depending on how you like to play and your kind of like experience with certain timing windows and aggressions and non-aggressions, you might have more success playing a certain thing. You might just be a Jeskai Wunderkind and you just win all your drafts with that. I won, like I said earlier, I won most of my drafts playing red-black in either draft. I historically do not play red at all, but I do not play red-black for sure. And that was the one thing that was winning for me, so I just kept going to the well that set and doing it. Which is funny because I sat down with Hunter and Nick the other night, and Hunter was saying like, oh, that's funny because I had my most success playing, I think he said green-blue or green-black. Both were really good. And then I think Nick said, like, I forget what he said, but it was something different than we were all three saying something different. And we were all winning because we all climbed pretty high in that format. So that's it. I'm going to get out of here and draft some more Tarkir Dragonstorm. Good luck in your drafts. Hope you had a good pre-release if you went to pre-release, and we'll talk soon.